For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the order of the House of January 21, 2026, I call up House Concurrent Resolution 68, and I ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
Concurrent Resolution 68. Concurrent resolution to direct the removal of United States armed forces from Venezuela that have not been authorized by Congress.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 21st, 2026, the concurrent resolution is considered as read. The concurrent resolution shall be debated for 1 hour, equally divided among and controlled by Representatives Mast of Florida, Representative Meeks of New York, and Representative McGovern of Massachusetts, or their respective designees. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Govern, will each control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the resolution under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to say this twice. Once for each of my colleagues over here managing, Representative Meeks and Representative McGovern. There are no troops in Venezuela. Let me say it one more time for you all. There are no troops in Venezuela. Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it was only last month that we stood on this floor debating the same resolution. My colleagues across the aisle defended the administration's claim that an unauthorized U.S. military operations in the Caribbean and threats against Venezuela were about what? Stopping drugs. And at that time I asked a simple question. I asked and never received an answer. If this was about drugs, why did the president pardon the former leader of the Honduras, a convicted drug trafficker who bragged about shoving drugs up the noses of the gringos? The administration's own actions have since made the truth absolutely clear. This was never about drugs. The unauthorized January 3rd operation was not conducted to address an imminent threat to the United States, nor to advance democracy in Venezuela. Donald Trump has abandoned even the pretense of national security. He has been very explicit about what his intent is. We're there to take Venezuela's oil. That's what this was about. He propped up Maduro's regime, praised Maduro's vice president as a terrific person, and sidelined the Democratic opposition, forcing Maria Corina Machado through the back door of the White House. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and Stephen Miller postured as viceroys of America's newest colony, while American taxpayers are on the hook to ensure Trump's oil baron friends are fed the spoils. Guess what? There's no plan for what comes next. No plan to deal with the entrenched military and paramilitary forces spread across a country twice the size of Iraq. No plan if the so-called acting president refuses to serve as Trump's puppet. And no explanation of what the president means when he says he's not afraid to put boots on the ground. This administration is winging it and driving the United States headfirst into another open-ended foreign conflict that, as history has shown, is destined to backfire in years to come. For those of you who deny this is warmongering, there is still a U.S. aircraft carrier parked in the Caribbean. tens of thousands of young American men and women remain on standby. And if the president wants to drag the United States into a war, the American people don't want this. He must come to Congress first. The debate belongs on this floor, and we've all asked for what the cost has been and what the cost will be to the American people. No answers to that either. So let's be equally clear. Venezuela is not an end of this recklessness. In exchange for a rules-based system the United States built to extend our influence around the globe, Donald Trump is reducing the United States to a regional bully with fewer allies and more enemies. This isn't making America great again. It's making us isolated and weak. Donald Trump's New World Order is not new. It is the old logic of empires. Might makes right. The strong take from the weak. It is the same backwards worldview that Vladimir Putin uses in Ukraine, and the same logic China will cite when it looks at Taiwan. We've seen where that road leads, to endless conflict. So, to my Republican colleagues, the American people want us to lower their cost of living, not enable war. Now is the time to stand by your oath of office and end this dangerous game before it's too late. It is time for Congress to reclaim our authority that the Constitution gave us, that Article 1 authority, and say enough is enough. A president is not a king. He's not an emperor. And without an act of Congress, he cannot invade a nation and set us down the road of war. Let us stand up and do our responsibilities. Let's see where the Congress stands. Let's have a vote on this floor and see where the majority of the members of the United States House of Representatives is. The people deserve to know. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman reserves. The gentleman reserves. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying something simple that shouldn't be controversial in the People's House. On questions of war and peace, on questions of life and death, Congress is not supposed to be a potted plant. We don't get paid to outsource hard decisions. We don't get brownie points for showing up. Our founders weren't naive about threats, but they were realistic about power. That's why they chose to entrust Congress with the power to make war, not the president, not the courts, not the states, but the elected representatives of the people. And call me crazy, but I think if we abdicate that power, we are not only doing a disservice to the people we represent, we are violating our sacred oath of office, our oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, the last time I brought up this resolution, I was told it was premature because there had not been strikes in Venezuela. Yet, let me quote what my Republican friends said in their own words. Chairman Mast, quote, "This resolution to me doesn't make much sense because we are not in hostilities inside Venezuela," end quote. Congressman Keith Self said, quote, "This is not necessary as it removes our armed forces from hostilities against the country where there have been no hostilities," end quote. Congressman Warren Davidson, quote, is the contention that this is a present condition, that there are U.S. forces in violation of the War Powers Resolution, or is it a hypothetical future, end quote. Congressman Tom McClintock, if the president launched an unprovoked attack on Venezuela without congressional declaration, we should have this debate. Until then, I think Democrats would do well not to cry wolf on such an important matter. Even Susie Wiles, the president's own chief of staff, said, and I quote, "If he were to authorize some activity on land in Venezuela, then we'd need Congress." So we got lots of smug lectures from the other side. But guess what? On January 3rd, 2026, not only did Donald Trump authorize land activity in Venezuela, his administration did not come to Congress beforehand. We weren't even the first group that he talked to after the attack on Venezuela. And I guess the best we can get from the current majority here is that there's never a good time for Congress to assert its war powers. It's either too soon or it's too late. Well, I don't think it's too late because we're still dealing with the consequences of this unauthorized, unlawful military strike. Nicolas Maduro, a brutal tyrant, was removed from power, and the Trump administration replaced Maduro with his own damn vice president. I mean, is that the big victory that my friends think we should be celebrating? Meet the new boss, same as the old boss? They left in power the same illegitimate regime that rules through oppression, fraud, and violence. They left in control the same security apparatus that violates people's rights. They preserved the same corrupt cartel state. Am I missing something here? Because from what I can tell, the president put our troops in harm's way without congressional consent, all so that he could replace one dictator with another dictator. Everything is the same except the face at the podium. And now the president says he's the one running Venezuela. I don't even know what the hell that means. He says we control the oil. What happens if the Venezuelan people don't want that? Will he send troops into Venezuela? What is the clearly defined mission here? I don't know what it is. I mean, look what's happened since he claimed he's in charge. Repression has gotten worse. Security forces are interrogating people at checkpoints, confiscating phones, detaining journalists. Again, I ask, what was this all about? And if we don't know what, and we don't know what will happen next, shouldn't we all agree, whether you support Trump's actions or oppose them, that we should have a debate on this stuff? That we should authorize an expansion of military forces if that's what's in the future, that should be a debate, we should have a vote on it. That's all we're asking here. But this is crazy. We can't be asleep at the switch. I mean, no oversight, no hearings, no votes, just blind obedience to the executive. That's not the way this place is supposed to run. So if my colleagues respect this institution, the House of Representatives, they will vote yes to stop this madness from going any further than it already has. We ought to vote on these issues, and with that, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, yield myself as much time as I may consume. Neither of my colleagues bothered to say anything about what their bill they're bringing forward actually does. They didn't say a word about it. So let's quote their own bill for them, since they clearly don't want to talk about it. They want to remove U.S. forces from hostilities in Venezuela. That is what the bill says. Anybody can go read it, black ink, white paper. So let's get straight to the point. The U.S. is not at war with Venezuela. I know you all predicted that there's going to be some forever protracted war, but we were never at war with Venezuela. There are no boots on the ground. Democrats are asking us to vote on a resolution about a situation that literally does not exist. We do not have anybody there in Venezuela fighting. There are no tanks on the ground in Caracas. There are no snipers in the tree line. Doesn't exist. Again, we are not at war. Maybe they're conferring about that right now. Let me confer with my colleagues a minute. Are we at war? I confirmed with my staff, we're not at war. Are there any troops on the ground? I confirmed with my staff also, there are no troops on the ground. They should confer with their staff. I see them doing that. Your Senate Democrat colleagues, they tried to bring this exact same resolution to the floor of the Senate, but even the Senate was smart enough to pull it because they didn't want to be embarrassed. Because let's say it again, we are not at war. Most of you Democrats predicted that we were going to be in some forever war, which again, by the way, you said after the strike hitting the Iranian nuclear facilities, their nuclear infrastructure, you all said we're going to be in a forever war. We weren't. And then you said the same thing years ago when President Trump killed Qasem Soleimani. We're going to be in this forever protracted war. Guess what? We weren't. We haven't been. Not for one moment since then. My Democrat colleagues, they are batting zero in predicting forever wars. Operation Absolute Resolve was a law enforcement action to bring Nicolas Maduro, an indicted narco-terrorist with a $50 million bounty, to justice. And President Trump finished the job. Thank you, President Trump, for finishing the job. It was literally over before breakfast. I've been in war, I can tell you. An operation that's over before breakfast, that's not a war. The Department of War, let me say this again, is not engaged in any hostilities within the Venezuela territory or with the Venezuelan military. They're not in tank battles. There are no tactical operations centers there. There are no convoys. There are no U.S. mess halls over there. There are no field hospitals. There are no trenches with infantry soldiers shooting at one another. We're not even there long enough for soldiers to heat up an MRE. That's what we eat in the field in the military, guys. But just to give you a level of peace of mind, because you were curious about this, Secretary Rubio confirmed in his letter last week that no U.S. armed forces are in Venezuela. He also confirmed that should there be any military operations that would put our forces in hostilities with Venezuela, that the administration will provide the appropriate notifications to Congress, literally in his letter. So what is this really about? This bill that you all refused to even say a word about in your opening statements. It's about spite. It's about the fact that you don't want President Trump to arrest Maduro, and you will condemn him no matter what he does, even though he brought Maduro to justice with possibly the most successful law enforcement operation in history. Your hypocrisy is clear as you chant and you lead your No Kings protest, but when it comes to taking down a dictator, you crawl into a corner, you curl up, and you start to cry about it. This is about your base having protests to free Maduro. This is about appeasing your far-left friends. Now, whether my colleagues want to admit it or not, the world is a safer place because President Trump had the backbone, the stones to do what nobody else would, bring Nicolas Maduro to justice. So, let me say this affirmatively as possible. If anybody votes yes on this war power resolution that my colleagues didn't want to describe, they are stupid. Because again, there is nobody at war, no forces in hostilities in Venezuela. It would be like them calling me today to take a pie out of the oven that we all ate a month ago. Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
And you know what happened in the Senate? They had a vote. First, 5 Republicans joined Democrats. But in his general style, 2 of them were very threatened by the president and had to reverse their vote the next week. We need to have the vote here and see if the courage that the 5 first showed and the 3 that continue to show, whether my colleagues on the other side is going to have the courage to stand up and do their job and make sure that the power that we have in the House of Representatives to oversee the executive branch and not just be a patsy to this executive branch exists. And now you have 2 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Jim Hines.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Not much surprises me anymore, but to sit here and to listen to the storied House Foreign Affairs Committee chaired by somebody who calls the opposition stupid, to hear our motivations as we stand up for a fundamental constitutional prerogative mocked through ad hominem attacks. Shame, sir. Shame. We are here because we are standing for our constitutional right to be consulted on the most consequential decision that the United States can make, whether we engage in hostilities and put young men and women at risk. The chairman's summer stock theater and cringy antics notwithstanding, this has nothing to do with whether there are troops on the ground in Venezuela. We will stipulate your argument, pathetic as it is, Mr. Speaker. What this is about is whether we see what we saw happen 3 weeks ago happen again. 3 weeks ago, there were boots on the ground, and we didn't know about it. This bill is about saying that on the most consequential thing that this Congress can do, we have a voice. The representatives of the people, the Article I authority. Let's set aside Venezuela. I won't use that term again. Let's stand up for our constitutional rights to be consulted for what may happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or next week. Not much surprises me anymore, Mr. Speaker. I've watched my majority friends completely abandon their policy positions. Brutally anti-immigration because of this president, obliterating free trade, completely leaving behind everything that the Republican Party used to stand for, praising Vladimir Putin, attacking our NATO allies. You know what? Policy flexibility is not the worst thing in the world. I wish it weren't happening because of the reason that it's happening, but policy flexibility is one thing. But abrogating your constitutional duty to be consulted and to authorize force, and then to be mocked for it, shame, sir, shame. We need to stand up as an institution and say, we get consulted on the most consequential things that we can do. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. Once again, I want to remind to direct your comments to the chair. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I just say to the distinguished chairman that his arguments are it's either too early or it's too late. I mean, our troops were on the ground. Our troops were shot at. They were wounded. Thankfully, they are home and they are safe. But with this, all we're saying here is that if you're going to expand and utilize our military again, you come to Congress and ask for a vote. And that's not just our prerogative, it's our responsibility. It's in the Constitution. That's our damn job. If you don't want to do it, do something else. But it's our responsibility. And in terms of the gentleman's interpretation of the War Powers resolution, I would simply suggest that maybe he and his team go to the Congressional Research Service and get a briefing to understand how it works. But this is our responsibility. It's our job. I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. And it's really devastating to listen to the other side talking about how we somehow were not supposed to be told when boots went on the ground before. Somehow we were lucky enough, by God's grace, that nothing bad happened to men and women in the service of our nation, and yet they actually were injured, 7 of them. The U.S. military is being used against Venezuela without congressional authorization, without transparency, and in ways that appear only designed to benefit the very powerful amongst us, the oil companies, and not the Venezuelan people, and certainly not our American people to whom we are obligated to represent. It's as simple as that. The American people don't want their sons or their daughters sent into harm's way for their missions to Venezuela or to Greenland or to anywhere else that are undertaken just to enrich corporations and the most wealthy amongst us and cronies of the presidents, and to do nothing in the process to lower the cost of living, to help families afford housing or health care, or to secure a future for our children.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
I'm struck by the fact that
I yield 30 additional seconds.
I am struck by the fact that we are in a place where we have maligned others in the past for brutish isolationism, for colonial instincts that we have long condemned in our own adversaries. I urge my colleagues on both sides of this aisle to vote yes, to do our jobs so that we may reaffirm our authority and rein in reckless action. Thank you, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I yield to my friend, I would just say this will probably be the only apology they get out of me today. I apologize for talking about the bill and the text of the bill that they still refuse to talk about. They're not willing to do that. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Crawford. Actually, I yield him as much time as he shall use.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank Chairman Mast for yielding and for his leadership on this critical issue. Mr. Speaker, make no mistake about it, we are not at war with Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is a murderer, an autocrat, a narco-terrorist, a thug who has oppressed his own people, stolen elections, and turned a once prosperous and free country into a desperate nation that millions have fled. And most importantly, as for the action the United States took against him on January 3rd, he is a criminal, an indicted fugitive from U.S. justice. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have demanded Maduro's removal for years. After the stolen 24 election, the fraudulent 18 election, and the Constituent Assembly power grab in 2017. In fact, H-Res 1409 of the 118th Congress is a Democrat-sponsored resolution with the unambiguous title of, quote, standing in solidarity with the Venezuelan people and condemning Nicolas Maduro's attempt to steal the Venezuelan presidential election. Or here's another Democratic hit. H.R. 8741 of the 118th Congress, pointing to the threat to our homeland, defining Maduro as a person of concern who has engaged in, quote, a long-term pattern or of serious instances of activity adverse to the national security of the United States, the security of critical infrastructure of the United States, or the safety and security of United States persons. And who can forget Democrat-sponsored H.R. 5670 of the 118th Congress that succinctly called for, quote, an end to the usurpation of presidential authorities by Nicolas Maduro. Instead of celebrating President Trump's historic leadership on this issue and the unmatched operational excellence of the United States military, law enforcement officers, and intelligence community in carrying out this historic and heroic effort, House Democrats are once again putting politics before protecting the American people. Mr. Speaker, this hypocrisy is evident in the message coming from congressional Democrats. Earlier this month, Chuck Schumer stated that President Trump, quote, seems content to drag our country into an endless war with no plan, no transparency, and nothing but wishful thinking, end quote. Nothing could be further from the truth. Operation Absolute Resolve was a masterfully, meticulously planned law enforcement operation supported by the U.S. military. I don't know how much clearer we must be with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but the U.S. is not at war with Venezuela. None of the actions taken by the Trump administration to execute an arrest warrant on a criminal constitute war. The Trump administration has briefed both chambers of Congress in detail on the operation to bring Maduro to justice, an action that Democrats in this chamber would have celebrated had it been carried out by the feckless and failed Biden administration. Additionally, Secretary Rubio confirmed again to Congress on January 14th that there are currently no U.S. troops in Venezuela and that the introduction of U.S. armed forces into future hostilities will be undertaken consistent with notifications of the War Powers Resolution if required. Mr. Speaker, the hypocrisy of House Democrats is palpable this afternoon in this chamber. I urge each of my colleagues to vote down this deeply flawed resolution and instead thank President Trump for continuing to take historic action to place the safety of American people first. I thank Chairman Mast for his partnership and leadership and yield the balance of my time.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
And the last time we were here, the chairman was talking about it was all about drugs. Yet today I have not heard anything about drugs. The president said it was about drugs. That was the imminent threat to the United States, allegedly. We don't hear anything about drugs. We don't hear anything about democracy. All we hear about is oil and taking those resources. Fact of the matter is, they talk about we're not at war. I know that that aircraft carrier is still sitting right there where we led the attack before, where the attack took place. I know there's a blockade taking place right now. So our military is still right off the shore of Venezuela. And I know that we want to make sure that we take care of our responsibility as members of the House of Representatives and have the oversight and say to the president, should he decide to strike again, come to the Congress first. With that, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Representative Chris DeLuzio.
Thank the gentleman from New York, Mr. Speaker, and to respond to the notion of hypocrisy, that we should rely on the Secretary of State's notification when required. We were not notified. The Congress did not receive notification or ask for authorization before Americans were sent to fight and to bleed in Venezuela. 7 Americans were wounded in that military operation. There is a functional blockade of Venezuelan oil. As others have pointed out here, Mr. Speaker, an aircraft carrier strike group sits nearby, poised to again send Americans into Venezuela should the president order them. And let's talk about hypocrisy. In the 118th Congress, this body voted on 2 war powers resolutions to remove Americans from hostilities that had not been authorized by the Congress. And in those 2 votes, 52 Republicans and 47 Republicans, respectively, thought that Congress ought to have a say about our war powers. And what's changed? The party of the occupant of the White House. Be consistent, Mr. Speaker. Support this resolution. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman keeps talking about the bill, and here it is here. I did talk about the bill, and let's talk about the bill again. I have it right here. It's 2 pages. The way the bill is written is to comply with the War Powers Act. The bill would simply prevent further escalation. If you're watching at home, read it yourself, H-Con Res 68. And the reason we think we need to do that is because the administration already did not get permission before escalating the first time. And by the chairman's logic, the only time we can ever have a vote is if there are physically boots on the ground. That just is logically insane. It doesn't comport with the way the War Powers Act is written. By his logic, the president should be able to launch a preemptive nuclear war without congressional authorization. I mean, that's nuts. I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Ryan.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, we face a fundamental question here. Who makes the decision to send our most precious resource, our young men and women in uniform, into harm's way? Is it a 5-time draft dodger who's called them suckers and losers, or is it the American people with us as their voices? Mr. Speaker, I was on the receiving end of this same chicken hawk BS for 27 months in combat in Iraq, and I don't need to be lectured by my colleagues. We all know how that went. Thousands of American lives lost, trillions of dollars spent, not on one, but 2 forever wars over the last 20-plus years that we should not have started in the first place, and most importantly, no honest conversation with the American people about what would be required, what blood and treasure would be spilled across, halfway across the world. And now we're seeing it play out all again. History doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes. We in this room had the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State come to Congress before the end of this calendar year and blatantly lie to our faces and, more importantly, lie to the American people. Why? Because they know it isn't right or popular. The last thing, Mr. Speaker, the American people want is another regime change war, forever war, for oil. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution and to not repeat history. Yield back to the gentleman.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, there it was again, a forever war. President Trump has never brought America into a forever war. Any operation he's conducted pretty much done before breakfast, just like Venezuela. I think my Democrat colleagues can't wrap their head around that something can be about more than one thing at a time. It can be about Maduro and his lawlessness. It can be about drugs. It can be about the people of Venezuela. It can also be about making sure sanctioned oil doesn't flow around the globe. It can be about more than one thing. I'm proud to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, my friend, Mr. Mario Diaz-Balart.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, here we go again. As Chairman Massa said, there are no troops in Venezuela. Look, the only purpose of this resolution, let's be clear, is to stop the counter of narco-terrorism and drug traffickers in this hemisphere. And I know that so many in the radical left are upset that Maduro, the head of the Cartel de los Soles, was picked up and brought to New York to stand trial. These narco-terrorists are responsible for the death of thousands of Americans every single year because of drugs. So every time the U.S. eliminates one of these drug boats, it actually saves American lives. And let's talk about what is actually going on. While there are no U.S. troops, the men and women of the armed forces, what they're doing, they've struck 35 drug boats, smuggling drugs that kill Americans. They've seized 7 oil tankers attempting to evade sanctions. Americans. They've seized 7 oil tankers attempting to evade sanctions. So it's very simple. Let's not protect those drug dealers, those cartels. Let's protect the American people. The way to do that is to vote no on this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve.
Mr. Speaker, Again, my Democrat colleagues are not speaking about the words of the bill, the basic grammar. It says remove forces from hostilities. There's no forces in Venezuela. They can't just make up words. I know they like to do that. They like to say plural pronouns can be used on one person and things like that, but they can't just make up grammar. Write the bill right if you want to do it. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 5 minutes to an individual who has truly been fighting for democracy for the Venezuelan people, who want them to have the right to vote. An individual who have stood and is trying to keep their TPS status so they're not forced back into the regime of Maduro. The gentlewoman from Florida, Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman, the ranking member, for yielding. I rise in support of this resolution because I simply do not trust this president to truly prioritize democracy and the will of the Venezuelan people. I represent one of the largest Venezuelan communities in the country. Many of my constituents fled brutal repression under Chavez and Maduro. Most of them were glad to see Maduro captured and face justice, and so was I. Maduro is a murderous criminal who tortured, imprisoned, impoverished, and oppressed his people. He stole elections, jailed his opponents, drained his nation's wealth, and unleashed the largest peacetime refugee crisis in history. 8 million Venezuelans driven into exile. I was glad to see Maduro held accountable, and this resolution, as my colleague who just spoke, Mr. Diaz-Balart, would clearly know, would not preclude operations like the one that arrested him, especially if the administration finally does what they should have already done: come up with a day-after plan for democracy, present a coherent strategy to Congress, and make a case to the American people. But arresting Maduro does not fix Venezuela, because Maduro did not destroy Venezuela by himself. He relied on criminal affiliates who helped him cling to power: Delcy Rodriguez, Jorge Rodriguez, Diosdado Cabello, Vladimir Padrino Lopez. All of them share in Maduro's guilt, but instead of being thrown in jail, they were left in charge. The machinery of repression was left in place, and the democratic hopes of Venezuelans are being left behind. My constituents who celebrated Maduro's capture are horrified to see President Trump normalize relations with the same regime that forced them to flee. This president must not make the U.S. complicit in the brutal repression of Venezuelans, which continues today. Yet Trump continues to jeopardize the lives of lawful Venezuelan immigrants by forcing them back into this chaos after he terminated their TPS. Trump has lavished praise on Maduro's hand-picked replacement, Delcy Rodriguez, who ran the regime's torture dungeons. Meanwhile, he's dismissed and demeaned Venezuela's democratic leaders like Maria Corina Machado and President-elect Edmundo Gonzalez. In fact, President Trump hasn't said one word about seeking democracy or human rights in Venezuela. If Congress backs military action, then democracy, stability, and safety for Venezuelans should be the objective. But those aren't President Trump's goals. He only speaks about getting a cut of the regime's oil sales and ignores their ongoing repression. I have no illusions about the dangers this regime poses. I'm open to the idea that military action may be needed to achieve democracy. And if Trump truly cared about Venezuelan democracy, he has tools at his disposal. He has broad authority to defend our national security interests. He could employ covert action, enforce vigorous sanctions, support civil society groups on democracy's front lines, and take action, as he does, against cartels and narco-terrorists. And he could use his, quote, tremendous leverage to push for elections and human rights, because this resolution doesn't block any of that. Instead, Trump is just seeking profits for the same big oil companies who've propped up Maduro for years. He moved on his own with no plan for democracy, and he swapped out one dictator for another and declared mission accomplished. My vote today isn't about the means that this president used to capture Maduro. Presidents should use the power they have to be tough on dictators who abuse their own people. But given his utter disdain for democracy and his callous disregard for the chaos and violence to which law-abiding Venezuelans are being deported, I simply cannot give this president a blank check to put troops on the ground. For all we know, Trump plans to deploy troops to protect the regime's oil facilities, not to liberate Venezuelans. I've known Maria Corina Machado for years, but this week I was finally able to meet her in person for the first time. She's remarkable, inspiring, and I have total faith in her selfless dedication to bring Venezuela out of darkness. More importantly, Venezuelans have faith in her. When we spoke, she discussed the essential momentum the democracy movement needs and the danger of allowing this lingering dictatorship to reinforce its grip on power. She told us conditions on the ground are dire, that we cannot allow the regime and the military militias to strengthen their hold on power. Maria Corina has a vision to resurrect Venezuela, and there is a U.S. role to see it through. That's why it's so disturbing that her White House meeting ended with no firm commitments, no timeline for elections, and no guarantees from President Trump. Instead of opening a pathway to democracy, this president is focused on opening offshore accounts to hoard Venezuelan oil money. So I support this resolution because of my faith in Maria Corina Machado, not in spite of it. It is rooted in my ongoing commitment to standing resolutely with Venezuelans to demand an end to this illegal regime. It is aligned with my belief that a transition to democracy led by Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez must take place. I hope I'm wrong about the president's motivations. Can I have an additional 30 seconds? I hope I'm wrong about the president's motivations, and he brings Congress a real strategy to transition Venezuela to democracy. I hope he was moved by Maria Corina Machado's vision, and not just her Nobel Prize. But I'm a show-me person, not a tell-me person, and so far, President Trump has shown that he's more concerned with seizing Venezuela's oil than freeing Venezuelans from dictatorship. Hasta al final. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States is now running Venezuela from Washington. On January 3rd, the President ordered a military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro and install the President's hand-picked successor, Delcy Rodriguez, as the interim President. President Trump went to war, removed a leader, and established a puppet government. The President executed this transition when the most popular opposition leader, Nobel Prize winner Maria Corina Machado, was out of the country. If he wanted to, the President could help her return to Venezuela. It's telling that he is not. Article 1 of the Constitution of the United States makes it clear that Congress has the sole authority to declare war. The President, in taking these actions without our consent, has trampled on the separation of powers and taken the American people into yet another war that they do not want and cannot afford. And people are wondering, they're asking, what was it for? Was it to remove the socialists? No, the socialists are still in power. Delcy Rodriguez is a true believer in the same ideology and party that Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro championed. Was it to remove drug dealers in the hemisphere? No. The same Venezuelan government that he says is dealing drugs are still in charge because of him. So clearly, this is not about socialists and it's not about drugs. Donald Trump has said that this is about oil and enriching multi-billion-dollar companies over the will of the American people. Congress, unfortunately, has not stood up to his despotic actions. He's not listening to Congress or to the American people. He's threatened military action against Greenland, Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, and Panama. And he's threatened to keep sidestepping Congress if you will let him. At a time when Americans are struggling to pay for rent, groceries, and child care, they don't want us to spend billions in Venezuela. They would rather we spend that money here. But somebody is getting rich. Donald Trump, can I get 30 more seconds?
I yield 30 additional seconds.
Donald Trump has set up offshore bank accounts in Qatar outside the U.S. system, and only he knows where the money is going. There is a $500 million slush fund that the President is controlling right now. You're not going to benefit from that. Now, I ask my colleagues who have not joined us, how long will you stand by and be on the sidelines of the most consequential decision a country can make, to go to war? Are we a Congress or are we cowards? Will you stand up for the American people and do what's right?
The gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
It's always laughable arguments when they try to say the president is enriching himself. Just as one example, in this case, you don't see him collecting a $50 million bounty for bringing in Nicolas Maduro, a bounty that the previous administration agreed with because he's never in it for the money. He's in it for America every single time. I would encourage them, talk to their colleague, Ms. Wasserman Schultz. Ask her if things are better or worse for Venezuelans today than they were under Maduro. In that, I'm going to yield 2 minutes to the another gentleman from Florida, Mr. Fine.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time. My friend, the chairman, referred to stupidity in debating this bill. I'd like to talk about hypocrisy and illiteracy. 10 days before Joe Biden left office, he raised the bounty on Nicolas Maduro to $25 million. Now, I don't know if my Democrat colleagues thought that he would go, wow, $25 million. Maybe I should just turn myself in. But I'd like to believe that when they put that bounty out there, they actually believed he should be removed from office. There's an old Twitter post from President Biden that said, quote, Trump talks tough on Venezuela, but admires thugs and dictators like Nicolas Maduro, end quote. Well, guess what, Mr. Speaker? I think President Trump showed in actions, not words, that he was determined to remove a drug lord. And that is what Nicolas Maduro was from power. You know, the president doesn't have to let us know every time they go and arrest somebody who's broken the law. That's exactly what happened here. But now I want to talk about illiteracy. My friend, the chairman's talk about people not understanding what's in the bill. And before I got to Congress, I used to complain about really long bills that no one read before they voted on them. Well, this one's 6 lines long. And it doesn't talk about things like my colleague spoke about, like escalation. This bill deals with escalation. That's not what it does. It's 6 lines. And 2 of them say this. Congress hereby directs the president to remove United States armed forces from Venezuela. There aren't any there. So they propose to have us vote on something that is irrelevant because the action they want to stop is not taking place. There's no war there now. I think what my colleagues are shell-shocked because after all of these years of empty comments condemning Maduro, empty statements by them, empty statements by Joe Biden, talking about how bad a man he was, we finally have a president who actually went and did something about it. That's what President Trump did. We should be proud. We should be thanking. We should be supporting him for what he did.
Time has expired.
And we should be voting down this resolution. I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I just wonder what kind of man, when a woman earned the Nobel Peace Prize, Corina Machado, said that he wanted it. And her trying to fight for democracy came in, and he took it. He didn't earn it. What kind of man does that? I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Representative Jimmy Panetta.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. The military intervention in Venezuela left us with uncertainty, instability, and insecurity. Look, as a veteran, I commend the military operation to remove Maduro on January 3rd. But as an American, it left uncertainty for the day after. By replacing one despot with another, we're uncertain as to the government, to the oil, to the cartels, and to the future of democracy in Venezuela. This type of military adventurism can also create instability, not just in Venezuela, but in the region, and that creates insecurity for the United States. As we saw this week about Greenland, the president wants spheres of influence rather than stability from a rules-based order. Instead of standing up to China and Russia, the president just wants to impress them by acting like them rather than being better than them. That's what happens when we have a president that doesn't just want his own sphere of influence, he wants his own sphere of governance, especially when it comes to putting boots on the ground. This War Powers resolution would not only prevent that in Venezuela without further congressional approval, it would also demonstrate that this Congress can actually act like a co-equal branch of government and fulfill our responsibilities under the United States Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this War Powers resolution because the integrity of this institution is at question. Every member of this House has a duty to uphold the Constitution's systems of checks and balances by exercising its Article I powers entrusted to us. The executive's military exercise to capture the leader of Venezuela represents one of the most blatant usurpations of congressional authority we have seen in modern times. If we ignore it, we are not merely acquiescing to executive overreach, we are rendering impotent our branch of government. Thomas Paine said in 1776, "A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right." Some of my Republican colleagues may feel obligated to acquiesce because it's our party occupying the White House. It's our party who is the commander-in-chief. But the precedents we tolerate today will inevitably be used against us tomorrow when the reins of power change hands. That's precisely why our loyalty must be to the Constitution and not to any party. If our country wants war, then Congress must vote on it. We are the voice of the people. There's a reason so many of our offices bear a prisoner of war missing in action flag. It's a solemn reminder of the human cost of war and our obligation, not the obligation of a single executive or a private circle of special interests to decide when to go to war. Even the executive branch knows that Congress had the authority, not them. Do you remember the night of the invasion? It was the Attorney General who explained this was just a law enforcement action, that the military was merely assisting. And that's the problem we have, because then it became obvious that we were undertaking a military exercise. And if the unilateral use of force were not enough, the executive has compounded this abuse by seizing Venezuela's oil revenues, selling them, and depositing that money in U.S. Treasury-controlled accounts overseas. So now the executive presumes the authority to appropriate money. That's a direct violation of the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the Constitution is unambiguous. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. There was no law, there has been no law to appropriate this money that was seized in an act of war. If we allow an executive to seize foreign resources and direct spending from pillaged accounts without congressional authorization, people no longer have a voice in their government, and Congress's power of the purse becomes moot. If the executive believes war is justified, then let Congress declare it. If the executive believes foreign assets may be seized and spent and appropriated, then let Congress appropriate them. That is how a republic functions. And I yield back my time to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
My colleagues still not talking about the 6 lines of the bill that says remove forces from Venezuela. They're not talking about it because there are no forces in Venezuela. I'm very proud to yield another 2 minutes to the gentleman, also from Florida, Mr. Stubbe.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this resolution because it's nothing more than a weak and pointless attempt to attack our president and undermine our national security. We conducted a 40-minute operation to remove a drug-trafficking narco-terrorist, and Democrats are acting like we started World War III. For that brief, targeted action, they now insist Congress must step in and tie the president's hands. Let us be clear about how ridiculous this resolution truly is. It orders the United States to withdraw forces from Venezuela, yet there are no U.S. forces in Venezuela to withdraw. You cannot remove troops that don't even exist. That alone shows how unserious Democrats are in this effort. They also claim the act to remove Maduro was unconstitutional, which ignores Article 2 and decades of bipartisan precedent where presidents have undertaken limited military action without a declaration of war. Clinton acted in Kosovo, Obama acted in Libya, and most similarly, George H.W. Bush captured drug trafficker Manuel Noriega back in 1990. No one screamed constitutional crisis then. In fact, those acts were celebrated by both sides, and they were upheld by federal courts. The bottom line is that Nicolas Maduro is a criminal defendant charged by the United States Department of Justice with narco-terrorism and drug trafficking offenses, including conspiring to import cocaine into the United States and related weapon charges. He has run his regime like a cartel, flooding our country with poison and destroying American lives. This was not an act of war, it was an act of law enforcement. This resolution does nothing to protect the Constitution, nothing to make America safer, and nothing to stop the drugs killing our communities. It should be rejected. I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is
Mr.
recognized.
Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Oil over democracy. Trump has made clear his priorities, accepting ruthless suppression by Maduro's comrades, so long as the oil profits flow to him as the self-described acting president of Venezuela. With one major oil company describing the country as uninvestable, Trump has absolutely no winning strategy to secure any benefits for the American people. He doesn't just want to be king of America, he wants to be king of the universe. He wants to be a Putin or a Xi disrupting the global order that bipartisan American leaders made possible to prevent another world war. Imperialism, starting wars around the world wherever Trump's latest whim takes him, will not make America great again. It will make us much less safe. To found this country, Americans got rid of one despotic king. We don't need another one. Instead, we must demand an accountable president by adopting this important resolution and asserting the power of Congress. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I would just remind my colleague that President Trump has yet to start any war in either administration. His fight every day is protect the American homeland, protect the people of the United States of America, and he's done a damn good job. I reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I'm no further. I reserve. I'm ready to close whenever.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Same here, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves.
So I'm recognized. I go first, right?
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for closure.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I have still not gotten an answer to the only question that matters today. You know, why did we strike Venezuela, spending taxpayer money and putting American troops in harm's way to replace Maduro with his own vice president? I mean, someone who is an illegitimate ruler who is just as ruthless and evil as Maduro. I don't know why we did that. What was the point? Not a single one of my colleagues can answer that question because they have no answer. They know, but they know voting for this bill is right. And if people want to put our troops in harm's way, if they genuinely believe more military action may be necessary in the future, if that's what you believe, whether to defend oil fields or to do something else, then you should come. You shouldn't just pound the damn lectern and wave the flag. You need to come before this entire chamber and move a bill to authorize the use of military force. My friends should have the guts and the backbone to put up an authorization for the use of military force on the floor. Spell out the mission. Spell out the objectives. Tell the American people how long it lasts, what it costs, why it matters, and how we get a legitimate democratic government in Venezuela. I mean, have the guts to vote. That's all this bill is requiring. But don't give me this BS about how, oh, before the strikes it was premature to vote and now it's too late. I've seen this movie before, Mr. Speaker. It always starts with the White House telling us it'll be quick, it'll be clean, it'll be over in a matter of days, and then months later, years later, you get troops deployed, you get kids coming home in caskets, and you get taxpayers paying for endless quagmires that never end. And the same people are here on the floor telling us we're premature or crying wolf are suddenly nowhere to be found. I mean, that's the truth, Mr. Speaker. Wars are easy to start, but they're hard as hell to stop. And this resolution ought to pass, no matter what you believe about further military involvement in Venezuela. And what it says plainly is that if the president is contemplating further military action, then he has a moral and a constitutional obligation to come here and get our approval. The people we represent did not send us here to be potted plants while the White House sleepwalks us into another mess. If this administration wants to escalate, make this case to the American people. Get consent through their elected representatives. Follow the Constitution. And let me tell you what I think. I think this was all so that Donald Trump could get a good headline. I think it was so he could distract from the lousy economy and the fact that he's still covering up the Epstein files. And I think it's about theft, because the oil being taken from the people of Venezuela is being sold off and used to finance a slush fund in Qatar controlled by, you guess it, Donald Trump. But I don't think I've ever seen such a brazen example of corruption in my life. The President of the United States put American troops in harm's way so he could steal oil from Venezuela and deposit it into his own pocket. I think it's a disgraceful thing to do. It is time for my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to grow a spine, obey their oath, and do their damn jobs. You should vote yes on this resolution, whether you support President Trump's actions or you disagree with them. All this is simply, all this says is simply that if he wants to expand military operations, he has to come to Congress. It is that simple. It is not complicated. This is about the Constitution. This is about our oath. This is about representing the people who sent us here. I mean, to do anything less is a dereliction of our duty. I can't even believe that this is controversial. The idea that somehow we don't want to vote on whether to authorize the use of military force, whether it's in Venezuela or anywhere else. What is wrong with my colleagues who think this is such a big leap, that this is somehow not justified? Read the Constitution. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, last time I was on this floor, I had a question. And I still have that same question. And I heard members on the other side talk about the president's trying to protect the American people. In fact, I heard someone, and I understand why Nicolas Maduro was indicted. I'm going to ask the chairman again. I don't know whether he wants to answer this question, but if that's true, why did the President of the United States pardon a former leader of Honduras, former president, who was convicted of drug trafficking, who bragged about shoving drugs up the noses of the gringos? Why did the President of the United States pardon him?
You yielding me time?
Yeah, you can answer that question.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
President never explained it to me. Maybe he was just trying to make room for Maduro and his wife.
Yeah. Okay, that's funny. It's because he does not care. It never was about drugs. It was always about oil. That's why. He doesn't care. That's why he took the Nobel Peace Prize from someone else who earned it. He doesn't care. He cares about one person, himself, and enriching his family and his friends. Mr. Speaker, this War Powers resolution introduced by Representative McGovern would put an immediate end to this administration's reckless military interventions in Venezuela. We cannot allow the Constitution to be usurped by one president who believes he can unilaterally declare war, invade a sovereign nation, and buck the rules-based international system we helped build. If the House fails to check President Trump's aggression today, it will not end in Venezuela. I know the White House is paying close attention to this vote. And if we don't stand now and reassert our Article I power over matters of war and peace, we will have abdicated one of our most solemn responsibilities and reduce ourselves to a rubber stamp and become no better than the Duma in Russia. Our constituents sent us here to deliver on lowering their costs, not sit on our hands while the president keeps doing what he pleases. And with that, let us make sure that we pass this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let me answer some of the questions that my colleagues put up. Why did President Trump take Maduro? To protect the homeland of the United States of America, as he has done with action after action after action. The same reason that two presidents put a warrant, a bounty on Nicolas Maduro, not just President Trump, also President Biden. That's why Nicolas Maduro was snatched up, because of his poisoning of the people of the United States of America. Again, something can be true and also be true about another action and another action and another action. It was because of the bounty. It was because of the warrant. It was because of the drugs that he was bringing to the United States of America. It was because of his partnership with China, Iran, Russia, to be their foothold in the Western Hemisphere for their nefarious activities. It was because of the illegal shipments of oil that they were moving on Russian ships to China that were coming out of Venezuela. It was because of a lot of things that this took place. And does the president have a plan for the future? 100% he does. Free and fair elections. Freedom for the people of Venezuela. Ask the people of Venezuela if that's what they want. Ask the people of Venezuela if they're better today than they were before President Trump snatched up Maduro. They'll tell you they are. They're more free today,
and they're hoping for more and more freedom each and every day. President Trump has brought hope to our homeland by protecting this homeland that has been ignored for so long, and he's brought hope to so many others around the globe. The people of Venezuela, people across the Middle East, people across Europe, people in place after place because of his actions. He is the peace president. He's proven it over and over again. He has never been the president of forever wars. He's yet to create one. He's only worked in limited operations that protect the homeland of the United States of America and done the best job of it in the history of the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.